The morning sun reflected off the glass towers of downtown Miami as Marcus Hayes's private jet touched down at Miami International Airport. It had been a long flight from New York, where he'd spent the previous 18 hours in a conference room finalizing the biggest deal of his career. At 43 years old, Marcus had built Hayes Capital into one of the most successful private equity firms in the country, with a portfolio spanning technology, real estate, and hospitality ventures worth over $3 billion. But this acquisition was different. This was personal. The Grandview Hotels Corporation owned 47 luxury properties across North America, from boutique hotels in historic districts to flagship resorts on pristine beaches. The Miami location, a gleaming 30-story tower overlooking Biscayne Bay, was the crown jewel of the chain. And as of 9 a.m. that morning, Marcus owned all of it. The deal had closed electronically while he was in the air. His legal team had confirmed the wire transfer, the board had signed the final documents, and the press release was scheduled to go out at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. For now, Marcus was the owner of a hotel empire, and nobody knew it except his inner circle. He had chosen to stay at the Miami Grandview deliberately. He wanted to experience the property as a guest before his ownership became public knowledge. He wanted to see how the staff operated, how guests were treated, and whether the legendary Grandview service standards were reality or just marketing. Marcus grabbed his carry-on bag and briefcase from the overhead compartment and made his way off the plane. He dressed casually for the flight, a navy polo shirt and khakis, comfortable but presentable. After nearly 20 hours of meetings and travel, he just wanted to check into his suite, take a hot shower, and review the transition documents his team had prepared. The Uber ride from the airport took 30 minutes through Miami's bustling streets. Marcus watched the city pass by through tinted windows, the mix of Art Deco architecture and modern skyscrapers, the palm trees swaying in the ocean breeze, the vibrant energy of a city that never quite slowed down. The Grandview Hotel rose ahead, a sleek tower of glass and steel with the hotel's signature logo, an elegant G in gold displayed prominently at the entrance. The circular driveway was busy with luxury vehicles, valets in crisp uniforms moving efficiently, guests arriving and departing in a carefully choreographed dance of hospitality. Marcus stepped out of the Uber, declined the valet's offer to take his bag, and walked through the massive revolving doors into the lobby. The interior took his breath away, even though he'd seen the architectural renderings during due diligence. The space soared 4 stories high, crowned by an enormous crystal chandelier that caught the Miami sunlight and scattered it into 1,000 prisms. The floor was polished Italian marble in geometric patterns of cream and gold. Fresh orchids the size of small trees flanked the entrance. Contemporary art installations lined the walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered sweeping views of the bay. This was luxury hospitality at its finest, and Marcus felt a surge of pride. This was his now. He approached the reception desk, where 3 desk agents were busy with guests. A small sign indicated "Express Check-In" at the far end of the counter. Marcus headed there, setting his briefcase down and pulling out his phone to access his reservation confirmation. That's when he felt it. The shift in atmosphere. The subtle change in the air that he'd experienced countless times throughout his life. A man emerged from a door behind the reception desk. He was in his late 40s, dressed in an expensive charcoal suit with a Grandview Hotel's corporate pin on his lapel. His name tag read, Donald Pierce, General Manager. He had the kind of face that spoke of privilege, sharp features, perfectly styled hair with distinguished silver streaks, and eyes that assessed everything in terms of value and status. Those eyes landed on Marcus, and something flickered across Pierce's face. It wasn't welcome, it was evaluation, judgment, and dismissal, all in the span of a second. Pierce approached the desk where Marcus stood, bypassing the other agents who were helping guests. He didn't smile. He didn't greet Marcus with the warm professionalism the Grandview brand was known for. Instead, he stopped a few feet away and crossed his arms. "Can I help you?" Pierce asked, his tone carrying an edge that suggested he'd rather not. Marcus looked up from his phone. Yes, I have a reservation. Hayes, Marcus Hayes, checking in for 3 nights. Pierce made no move to check the computer. Hayes, he repeated slowly, as if testing the name for authenticity. And you made this reservation when? Marcus's internal alarm bells started ringing, but he kept his voice even. 2 weeks ago, confirmed it yesterday via email. Pierce's eyes moved deliberately from Marcus's face to his polo shirt, to his khakis, to his carry-on bag. The assessment was obvious, intentional, and insulting. I see, Pierce said, his tone dripping with skepticism. And what brings you to the Grandview? Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Business meetings. Is there a problem? Pierce finally moved to the computer, typing with exaggerated slowness. The Grandview caters to a very specific clientele. We need to ensure that all our guests meet certain standards. The words hung in the air, coded, but clear. Marcus had heard variations of this his entire life. The country club that suddenly had no membership openings, the restaurant with a mysterious dress code, the apartment building where the unit was always just rented an hour before he called. I'm sure my reservation is in your system, Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. And I'm sure I meet whatever standards you're referring to. Pierce stared at the screen, his expression unchanging. I see a reservation for Hayes, but there seems to be an issue with the payment method. Marcus's hand tightened on his phone. What kind of issue? The credit card on file has been flagged. We'll need to verify it before we can proceed with check-in. Marcus knew his credit card hadn't been flagged. He had a black American Express card with no preset spending limit, a platinum Visa for business expenses, and enough available credit to buy a small island. But he also knew what was happening here. He pulled out his wallet and placed his American Express on the counter. Here. Run this. Pierce picked up the card as if it might be contaminated, holding it between 2 fingers. He examined it under the light, turned it over, scrutinized the name. This card, Pierce said slowly, it's really yours? The question detonated like a bomb in Marcus's chest. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. Around them, other guests were starting to notice. A well-dressed couple at the adjacent desk glanced over. A businessman with a Rolex paused mid-conversation with a desk agent. The lobby, moments ago buzzing with activity, began to quiet as people sensed the confrontation. Yes, Marcus said, his voice level. That card is really mine. My name is on it. Now, are you going to process my check-in, or do we have a problem? Pierce set the card down on the counter but didn't pick up the payment terminal. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice but not enough to prevent nearby guests from hearing. Sir, the Grandview has a responsibility to protect against fraud. Credit card theft is a serious issue, and we have protocols. I'm going to need to see additional identification and verify that you are indeed the cardholder before I can accept this. Marcus felt heat rising in his face, but his expression remained controlled. He pulled out his driver's license and passport, sliding them across the marble counter. Pierce examined both documents with theatrical scrutiny, holding them up to the light, comparing the photos to Marcus's face, taking far longer than necessary. Other guests were openly staring now. A woman whispered something to her companion. A family with children stood frozen near the elevator, watching the scene unfold. Finally, Pierce set the documents down. The identification appears to be in order, but I'm still not comfortable processing this reservation. The Grandview maintains very high standards, and I have discretion to refuse service to anyone who I believe may not be a good fit for our property. Marcus's hands clenched at his sides. A good fit, he repeated quietly. Based on what exactly? Pierce's smile was thin and cold. Based on my 25 years of experience in luxury hospitality, based on my understanding of our clientele and what they expect when they stay at a Grandview property. And what do they expect? They expect, Pierce said, enunciating each word carefully, to be surrounded by guests who reflect the Grandview standard of excellence. People of refinement, sophistication, and means. The implication was crystal clear. Marcus stood there, a black man in casual clothes, and Pierce had decided he didn't belong. It didn't matter that Marcus had flown in on a private jet. It didn't matter that his net worth exceeded that of everyone in the lobby combined. It didn't matter that he could buy this hotel 100 times over. All that mattered to Donald Pierce was what he saw, and what he saw was someone he deemed unworthy. Marcus reached into his briefcase, his movements slow and deliberate. He pulled out a leather folder and opened it. Inside was the signed acquisition agreement, the document that made him the owner of every Grandview property, including the one he was standing in. He turned the folder toward Pierce. "Before you refuse me service, Mr. Pierce, I think you should read this." Pierce glanced at the document dismissively, then his eyes focused. His face went pale. The color drained so quickly it was almost comical. His eyes widened as they moved from the Grandview Hotel's letterhead to the signature blocks at the bottom to Marcus's name listed as principal acquirer. The lobby seemed to hold its breath. Pierce's mouth opened, then closed. He looked from the document to Marcus's face, searching for some indication that this was a joke, a mistake, anything other than the devastating reality now staring him in the face. This is, Pierce stammered. "A binding acquisition agreement," Marcus said calmly. "Executed this morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. As of today, I own the Grandview Hotels Corporation, all 47 properties, including this one, which makes you my employee, and based on what I've just experienced, a very soon-to-be former employee." The silence that followed was absolute. Every person in the lobby, from the guests to the staff to the valets who had wandered inside, stood frozen. The only sound was the gentle splash of the decorative fountain near the windows. Pierce's hands were trembling. "Sir, I didn't know. If I had known who you were." "If you had known who I was, you would have treated me with respect," Marcus interrupted. "But the problem, Mr. Pierce, is that you should have treated me with respect regardless of who I was. Every guest deserves that. Every human being deserves that." Pierce's face had gone from pale to red. "Please, sir, I can explain. I was just following protocol. We have to be careful about what?" Marcus asked, his voice quiet but sharp. "About black people in your lobby? About anyone who doesn't meet your narrow definition of what a Grandview guest should look like?" Pierce opened his mouth, but no words came out. Marcus continued, his voice carrying across the silent lobby. "I bought this company because I believed in its potential. I believed in the Grandview brand, the legacy, the promise of exceptional service. But what I just experienced wasn't exceptional. It was discrimination. It was prejudice. It was everything this brand should stand against." He turned to the other desk agents who were watching with expressions of shock and, in some cases, barely concealed satisfaction. "Is this how all guests are treated? Or just the ones who don't look like they belong?" One of the younger agents, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag reading Maria, spoke up quietly. "Sir, I'm so sorry. This doesn't represent all of us. Some of us have tried to speak up about issues, but nothing ever changed," Marcus finished for her. "Because the culture starts at the top, and the person at the top," he gestured to Pierce, "created a culture of exclusion." Marcus turned back to Pierce. "You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the property. You have 1 hour to clear your office." Pierce's face crumpled. "Please, I have a family. I've dedicated 25 years to this company. You can't." "I can," Marcus said firmly, "and I am. You made a choice today. You chose to judge someone based on their appearance rather than their humanity. That's not a mistake. That's a character flaw, and it has no place in any organization I own." Pierce looked around the lobby, searching for sympathy, for support, for anything to save him, but he found none. The guests looked away. The staff stood silent. Even the security personnel, now approaching at Marcus's gesture, showed no hesitation. As Pierce was led away, his protests echoing across the marble floors, Marcus turned to Maria. Who's the assistant general manager? Maria straightened. That would be Robert Chen, sir. He's upstairs in a meeting. Get him down here. As of now, he's the interim general manager. And schedule a staff meeting for, Marcus checked his watch, 2 hours from now. Everyone. Front desk, housekeeping, restaurant staff, everyone. Maria nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Right away. Marcus finally turned to the other guests, many of whom were still watching with wide eyes. I apologize for the disruption. The Grandview Hotels will be undergoing some changes, but our commitment to exceptional service remains unchanged. In fact, it's about to get stronger. He picked up his briefcase and carry-on. Now, if someone could please check me into my suite, I'd appreciate it. It's been a very long day. 2 hours later, Marcus stood in the hotel's grand ballroom, facing over 200 employees. They filled the space, from front desk agents to executive chefs, from housekeepers to concierge staff, all of them wondering what would happen next. Marcus had showered, changed into a suit, and reviewed the personnel files his team had sent over. What he found was troubling but not surprising. Multiple complaints about Pierce's management style, accusations of favoritism, reports of discriminatory behavior toward both staff and guests, all of it filed away and ignored by the previous corporate leadership. But that leadership was gone now, and Marcus was about to set a new standard. He stepped up to the microphone. Good afternoon. For those who don't know me yet, my name is Marcus Hayes, and as of this morning, I am the new owner of Grandview Hotels. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some had heard about the lobby incident, others were learning the news for the first time. I'm sure many of you witnessed or heard about what happened earlier today. I was denied service by your former general manager because he made assumptions about who I was based on how I looked. That kind of discrimination has no place in this organization, not toward guests, not toward staff, not toward anyone. He paused, letting the words sink in. But this isn't just about one person. Donald Pierce didn't create a culture of discrimination in a vacuum. It existed because it was allowed to exist, because people looked the other way, because complaints were ignored, because profits were prioritized over principles. Marcus's voice grew stronger. That changes today. We're going to implement comprehensive anti-discrimination training for every employee. We're going to create an independent reporting system for complaints with real investigations and real consequences. We're going to make the Grandview Hotels a place where everyone, guests and staff alike, is treated with dignity and respect. A few people in the crowd nodded. Others looked skeptical. Change was always met with resistance, especially in an industry as traditional as luxury hospitality. Marcus continued. I know some of you are worried about your jobs. Let me be clear. If you're good at what you do, if you treat people with respect, if you embody the values we're building here, your job is secure. In fact, there will be more opportunities for advancement than ever before. He gestured to a woman in the front row, pulling up her file on his tablet. Maria Rodriguez, front desk agent for 6 years, consistently top-rated in guest satisfaction, multiple commendations. Effective immediately, you're promoted to front desk manager. Maria's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Marcus scrolled through more files. James Peterson, concierge, 8 years of service, speaks 4 languages, has created experiences for guests that they rave about years later. You're now head concierge. He continued down the list, promoting talented employees who had been overlooked, recognizing excellence that had been ignored, rebuilding the leadership structure with people who had proven their worth through actions, not politics. By the time he finished, the ballroom was buzzing with energy. Hope had replaced fear. Excitement had replaced uncertainty. This is our fresh start, Marcus said. This is our chance to build something better, to create a hospitality experience that isn't just about luxury, but about humanity. About seeing every person who walks through our doors as someone worthy of our best. The applause started slowly, then built into a wave. People were standing, some crying, others smiling with relief. For years, they'd worked under a system that valued appearance over substance, connections over competence. Now, finally, merit mattered. As the meeting ended and employees filed out, many stopped to thank Marcus, to shake his hand, to express their gratitude. He listened to their stories, their experiences, their hopes for what the Grandview could become. Robert Chen, the new interim general manager, approached last. He was a man in his early 40s with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. "Mr. Hayes, I want you to know that what you did today, it wasn't just about Pierce. It was about all of us. You gave us permission to be better." Marcus nodded. "Just make sure we follow through." Words are easy. Action is what matters. The news of Marcus's acquisition and the dramatic events at the Miami Grandview spread quickly. By that evening, it was trending on social media. Hotel owner experiences discrimination at his own property became a viral story, sparking conversations about racial bias in the hospitality industry and beyond. The corporate headquarters in New York fielded hundreds of calls. Some were from guests expressing support, others were from industry analysts trying to understand the implications. A few were from competitors, suddenly worried about what a Hayes Capital-owned Grandview would mean for the market. But the most meaningful calls came from people who had experienced similar treatment at hotels, restaurants, and businesses across the country. They shared their stories, thanked Marcus for speaking out, and expressed hope that his actions might inspire broader change. Marcus spent the next 3 days at the Miami property, meeting with department heads, reviewing operations, and observing how the hotel functioned. He took meals in the restaurant, worked out in the gym, and even spent an afternoon shadowing the housekeeping staff to understand their challenges. What he found was a talented workforce that had been hampered by poor leadership. Once freed from Pierce's toxic management style, they flourished. Guest satisfaction scores improved within days. Staff morale was the highest it had been in years. Even the hotel's revenue started ticking upward as word spread about the changes. On his final evening in Miami, Marcus sat in the rooftop restaurant, looking out at the city lights reflecting off Biscayne Bay. His phone rang. It was his mother, calling from her home in Atlanta. "Marcus, baby, I saw the news. Are you okay?" Marcus smiled. His mother had a way of cutting through everything to ask the question that mattered most. "I'm fine, Mom. More than fine. What that man did to you, that manager, that was wrong. But I'm so proud of how you handled it. I just did what you and Dad taught me. Stand up for what's right, even when it's hard." His mother was quiet for a moment. "Your father would be so proud, baby. Not just because you're successful, but because you're using that success to make things better for other people." After they hung up, Marcus sat in the silence, thinking about his journey. He'd started with nothing, built an empire, and now had the power to reshape industries. But power without purpose was meaningless. What mattered was what you did with it. 6 months later, the Grandview Hotel's transformation was complete. Every property had undergone anti-discrimination training. The independent reporting system was in place and being used. Several more managers who had perpetuated toxic cultures had been replaced. And the brand was thriving, not despite the changes, but because of them. Guest reviews frequently mentioned the warmth of the staff, the genuine hospitality, the feeling that they were truly welcome. The Grandview had become known not just for luxury, but for inclusivity. Marcus was featured in Forbes, Business Insider, and the New York Times, but he always steered the conversations back to the broader issues, using his platform to advocate for systemic change in corporate America. One afternoon, Marcus returned to the Miami Grandview for a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The hotel was unveiling a new training center, a space dedicated to teaching hospitality excellence rooted in respect and dignity. As he stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled staff, many of whom had been there the day he was discriminated against, Marcus felt a deep sense of accomplishment. 6 months ago, I walked into this lobby and was told I didn't belong. Today, I'm standing here as proof that we all belong, not because of the color of our skin, Not because of our bank account, not because of our job title. We belong because we're human beings, and that alone makes us worthy of respect. He paused, his voice growing stronger. The Grandview Hotels isn't just a business. It's a statement. It's a promise that hospitality means welcoming everyone. It's a commitment to building a world where no one has to prove their worth just to be treated with basic human dignity. The applause was thunderous. As Marcus stepped down from the podium, Maria approached him, now confident in her role as front desk manager. "Mr. Hayes, I just wanted to say thank you. You changed my life. You changed all of our lives." Marcus smiled. "You changed your own life, Maria. You were always excellent. I just gave you the opportunity to show it." As he walked through the lobby, past the marble floors and crystal chandeliers, past the guests checking in and the staff serving them with genuine warmth, Marcus thought about Donald Pierce. He wondered if the man had learned anything, if he'd grown, if he'd changed. But ultimately, it didn't matter. Pierce's story was over. The Grandview story was just beginning. 5 years later, Hayes Capital had expanded the Grandview portfolio to 73 properties worldwide. Every hotel operated under the same principles Marcus had established in Miami: excellence through inclusion, luxury through humanity. Marcus was invited to speak at the International Hospitality Leadership Conference in Geneva. The room was filled with hotel executives, industry leaders, and government officials from around the world. He stood at the podium and told his story. Not the sanitized version, but the real one. The discrimination, the humiliation, the moment he revealed his ownership and watched a man's career crumble. "I tell you this not for sympathy," Marcus said, his voice filling the hall. "I tell you this because it still happens, every day, in hotels, restaurants, stores, and boardrooms around the world. People are judged not by their character, but by their appearance, and that judgment has consequences." He paused, looking out at the audience. "But here's what I learned. Change is possible. When we commit to it, when we build systems that promote equity, when we hold ourselves and others accountable. The Grandview Hotels is proof of that." The applause was sustained and heartfelt. After his speech, dozens of executives approached him, asking for guidance on implementing similar changes in their organizations. Some were genuine. Others, Marcus suspected, just wanted to avoid becoming the next viral discrimination story. But that was okay. Even if their motivations weren't pure, the result would be the same. More companies examining their cultures, more people being treated with dignity, more progress toward a world where incidents like his became impossible. Marcus returned to the Miami Grandview one last time, 10 years after that fateful day. He walked through the lobby, now even more beautiful after a recent renovation, and smiled at the diverse faces of guests and staff. He stopped at the front desk, where a young black man in his early 20s was checking in a guest with professionalism and warmth. When the guest left, Marcus approached. "Good afternoon. You're new here?" The young man smiled. "Yes, sir. Started 3 months ago. I'm working my way through hospitality school. The Grandview has a scholarship program for employees." Marcus nodded. "I've heard about that program. It's supposed to be excellent." "It is, sir. It's changing my life. I'm the first person in my family to go to college." Marcus felt a swell of emotion. "That's wonderful. Keep up the good work." As he walked away, Marcus thought about the scholarship program he'd established, funded by a portion of the Grandview's profits. Hundreds of young people, many from underserved communities, were getting opportunities they never would have had otherwise. This was the legacy he wanted to build, not just hotels, but pathways, not just businesses, but possibilities. He stepped outside into the Miami sunshine, looking up at the gleaming tower that bore the Grandview name. Somewhere in this city, Donald Pierce was living with the consequences of his choices. Marcus hoped he'd found redemption, but that wasn't his concern. What mattered was what happened here, in this building, in these 73 properties around the world, in the lives of the thousands of employees who came to work each day knowing they were valued, respected, and given the chance to excel. The world wasn't perfect. Discrimination still existed. Bias still infected systems and institutions. But Marcus had proven that change was possible, that one person standing up at the right moment could shift the trajectory of an entire industry. And if he could do it, others could too. That was the real power, not wealth, not ownership, but the courage to demand better and the commitment to build it. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.